Hello and welcome to my channel, and thank you for tuning in with me today. Today I am continuing the Understanding the Planets series, and we are looking at the underworld. Yes, it is time for us to talk about Pluto. So I have actually prepared some notes for this one. This is going to be a big one. So if you are new to astrology and you're looking for someone to explain all of the energies and all of the powers and all of the influences of the planets, and just unpack astrology in a way that is very straightforward and easy to understand, then you have come to the right channel. So please go ahead and click the subscribe button. But more importantly than just subscribing, please leave a comment below. Let me know where your Pluto is sitting in your chart. Just write something in there, put an emoji in, as any engagement helps this channel. Subscribers don't help channels that much on Instagram anymore since the algorithm changed. It's about engagement. So the more that you engage with me, the more that I'm going to engage back. So so far we've covered a few. We've done Venus, we've done Saturn, we've done Neptune, we did the Sun, the Moon, and Uranus, and now we are looking at the dark depths of hell. One of my favorite one of my favorite movies. It's strange, at the time when I was actually working in a cinema at the time when the movie came out, was the remake of Clash of the Titans. I really, really loved that. I thought that was so cool, and I loved Hades in that movie. I am a very big Greek mythology buff person. So yes, I really, really love all of the Greek pantheon and all of the gods and all of the stories and myths and legends and So I might be talking a little bit about the Hades and Persephone story, because it's so powerful and it's one of the most popular stories in Greek mythology. Perhaps at some point I was thinking about maybe taking a little bit of a detour off astrology videos and other types of heavy duty videos and just like talking about Greek myths, talking about Medusa and talking about these types of things. But that is something that I'll consider, possibly. So if you're new to astrology and you'd like to get your chart done, or if you're just curious about your birth chart and you'd like someone like myself to explain your chart to you, you can go ahead and book a astrological chart reading where you send in your details to me and I go ahead with your permission and I conduct a reading on your behalf for you, where I really go in there and look at your chart. We look at all of the angles, the houses, the placements, how they all affect each other. And also I do ask that if you'd like to send in some photos and context, it really helps me, as I can go in there and look at certain things as well, because I am an occultist and I am a psychic. Okay, so this is what I do. It's really cool. So go ahead and make a booking. I'm having 25% off my 30-minute readings, and then you get a link sent to you on an MP3 and you get to keep your reading. So Pluto. Oh my goodness, this is a big one. Pluto in someone's chart is probably the most, or one of the most underrated powers within a chart. To me, this is what makes or breaks a person. This is what really defines a person. When I think of Pluto as an astrologer, I think of the levels of rebirth that one has to go through in this life, the levels of change, the levels of very painful experiences. And I think that there is a real romanticism and a misconception about rebirth. And I have talked about this before in previous videos, where people love the idea of being the phoenix or being this magical bird that, is beautiful and it shines and it's fire, it's a firebird. But people don't really understand that in order to have rebirth, this involves a level of death first. So in order to have rebirth, we must die to something first. And so as we go through this life, all of the different versions of you have to die. That, when you upgrade a phone, when you do a phone update, it's a pretty good analogy. I think it's pretty fitting for most people these days to understand, is that you're kind of erasing the old version of the phone and downloading new software, which is more advanced, it's stronger, it's got a better protection system on it and all the rest of it. So that's kind of what this planet is all about. It is associated with profound change. Okay, so Pluto deals in endings and it deals in beginnings and rebirths. So all of the different versions of me that have come before me, I honor them all, I remember them all, but I've outgrown them, So this is really tricky. And when we look at Pluto and where it sits, we have to look at where it plays off everything else in the chart, all right? But Pluto, as we know, deals in Scorpio. And Scorpio is all about transformation. And it is the darker aspects of the human psyche. It's darker than the moon, okay? This is the darkest one of them all. It's extremely potent. And so when I meet someone, or when you meet someone, their level of rebirth and their level of going through the trials and tribulations of life and having to get ripped down to nothing and raked across the coals, going through breakups, going through the death process with a family member, or even dying to themselves. This is all part of what makes this planet the planet that equalizes kind of everything. All right, so Pluto deals in transformation and on all levels. All right, so when we think of transformation, think of it like in love, in finance, in all of that type of stuff. So the more aware you are of where your Pluto is and where its transits sit and where it's all placed, the better you will be. Pluto is quite complex for a lot of people. Now, I have mentioned before, in the modern world, and some astrologers will freak out and they get upset when I say this, you will notice that these days with young people, a lot of them are kind of pre-programmed NPCs. So non-playing character energy. So they're not, when someone is conditioned within the system of this world, they don't really have free critical thinking ability. They're not going to go through the initiation of life now, because they've got this system that kind of separates them from their own divinity and separates them from their own consciousness. So if you're operating purely from your sun sign, just your outer world, like a one-dimensional character, then Pluto and all of its complexities isn't really going to tear you a new asshole in this life. You're just going to live in your sun sign. And we know lots of people that live like that. A lot of the time I get readings that come through to me and I tune into the frequency, I look at the person, but a lot of it's all just sitting around their sun. They're not really going deep into themselves. In fact, a lot of people that want readings really only want to hear what they want to hear. All right, so that's the saddest truth about being an astrologer or a psychic, is people kind of pick and choose things that you say and that suits their narrative, that feels good, but don't really want to listen to, the things that make them feel uncomfortable. All right, so your relationship with Pluto and where it sits and what degree it sits in is going to be directly linked to the depths of your ability to explore the complexities of yourself as a human in this human world, in this lifetime. Okay, so this is heavy stuff. And Pluto is a very slow, powerful thing that breaks things down over time. All right, so it's really like depending on synastry as well. Always pay attention when you're looking at your chart and you're looking at your friend's chart or your lover's chart. Always pay attention to where the synastry is. If you don't know what synastry is, it's like where your placements sit in harmony or disharmony to someone else's placements. But the Pluto of where you sit and where they sit can really help you understand what you have to work on with that person in the relationship. All right, so when you're an astrologer and you're really trying to work in integrity and you're trying to tell the truth, this is the planet of transformation. And it's like, when we think of Pluto, this is more like an asteroid a little bit, and it is like a rock, icy, cold planet that is very small and it's very far out of the solar system. But its power and its influence over astrology and over the collective is everything that Pluto touches, it can supercharge it or it can super destroy it. Okay, so in a relationship transit, you might feel that if it's connected to Pluto, it can be very overwhelming. It can be very compulsive. If you have a Pluto, say, for example, in Scorpio, which, just off the bat for a second, I just want to make a side note. If you don't know this, and this is quite freaky, and I'd love to hear your comments on this actually, because once I figured this out, it was a real game changer for me as a mystic, I guess, was that in this incarnation or in this human world, souls incarnate at different times for different functions on a group collective. All right, so that's when people come up to me and say, I don't believe in astrology, and I start talking about this kind of stuff, and it really gets quite gnarly because it's so obvious that there is a force that's pulsating, like some would say the Godhead, where it will incarnate a lot of people that have very Saturnian or Saturn-based planets in their chart, because we know that Saturn energy is structure and that's rebuilding something. So we had a lot of people come in after World War II that were all here to rebuild things. And then we had a lot of people that were all born in Pisces and Neptune incarnate here, which became that kind of hippy-dippy movement. So there is a collective awareness in terms of the matrix, I guess you could say, in a way, and that's quite freaky because it's not, people like to think that they're so unique, but we're actually all just kind of fractals of rays off a sun. We're all off the same thing. There's nothing, my favorite line is like, there's nothing new under the sun. Okay. All right. So think about that. But when we think about Pluto, think about Hades, think about that scorpion energy. I have my Pluto in Scorpio, so I'm very aware of the power that I can hold over someone. I can really get inside someone's subconscious mind, like a flame. But just like a flame, that flame can turn things to dust and ash and crumble things. All right, so the power of Pluto can be very catastrophic in some cases. This is obsession. This is deep, dark, heavy experiences. And that's why it's all ruling Pluto in Scorpio, or it's ruling the scorpion, which is the arachnoid, and it's got that nasty stinger in its tail. Yeah. So there is an upheaval that happens within Pluto, within your chart. So where you see Pluto in your chart, it's all about the hidden, mysterious, taboo aspects of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that are buried. It's where your shame is kept. It's where your guilt is kept. It's kind of almost where your sins are kept. And everyone did something. Everyone here commits sin. Everyone here works for a company that might be like a bank or a financial organization that is basically a crime ring that traps people. We all are partaking on some level of entrapment with each other. Okay, so this whole Libra way of thinking where I just like, everything's fine and life is like a magical garden. That type of thinking isn't going to work when it comes to Pluto. All right. So Pluto is the embodiment of darkness. It's the underworld. And it really has a lot of like very intense wisdom that can be learnt. I have been obsessed in my life with, there's two signs that I've obsessed over in my life. One of them was Gemini, which always got me into trouble because Gemini is, very dangerous. The other is the Scorpion. And the Scorpion deals in this higher level of wisdom and power, and wielding power over someone, entrapping someone. All right. And so we know that when it comes to Pluto energy, just if you are a Scorpio person or you've got a lot of placements within Pluto, this is a person that isn't going to show who they are necessarily up front. Okay. This is a person that will have the poker face. There's a mystery to them. There's a mystery to their thought processes. They're not going to jump into anything too quick. All right. So think of it like, I know this and you probably know this too if you've been watching my channel. When you go to work, you're playing a character. It's called your work character. I probably should do a video on this at some point. You are interacting with people and showing a side to you that is always going to be in the best interests of your employment and to your boss, but it's not necessarily who you are. It's a character that we're playing of ourselves to get an outcome. Okay, so we all do this to certain levels. And when it comes to Pluto with this, it is someone who is in a constant need to regain control or gain power, because Scorpio and Pluto deals in power plays. So it's very difficult for a highly scorpionic person to surrender their power to you. They're not going to give it up. They're going to put you through tests. They're going to check you out. They're going to get to know you. It can be very trepidous. I've got my Pluto and Scorpio. I'm not handing over my knowledge and secrets to just anyone that walks through the door. There are things that I will never share with people. And that's one of the things that I know in a relationship will keep someone interested or around. For me, looking at another person, being a Scorpio perhaps, or for others looking at me, is that if I gave up everything, I would lose that of who I am. So it is the mystery that keeps relationships together. It's said like in a relationship, and I think this is kind of true, just veering off the topic for a second, that, if you are in a relationship and coming from a Pluto Scorpio person, you should probably be spending equal or more time apart. Because if I'm living with my partner and I'm with them every day and all of their little idiosyncrasies, they leave the toilet seat up, it starts to piss me off. It starts to annoy me. The mystery of that person becomes exposed. And when there's no mystery, there's no tension. Okay, so that's why a lot of women in particular are drawn to kind of Hades type figures. But the Hades type figure is probably someone that got out of jail, that gets them really wet, that gets them really turned on. But it won't be a cuck. It won't be a Libra wallpaper that's all about looking pretty and being transparent. The power of mystery is what keeps the woman turned on. Do you understand what I'm saying? I hope that made sense. So that's all Pluto energy. All right. So sometimes Pluto doesn't need to speak. It doesn't need to tell you that it's powerful. It just is powerful. That I've learned over time in my life that the power of silence is very, very potent. And in a lot of cases, I don't need to say anything. My behavior and how I conduct myself and the results that I get from the work that I do speaks for itself. It's like a great big fat person telling you how fit they are. We can see how fit they are. We can see what effort they've put into their upkeep of their body. So you can't manipulate Plutonic energy because Plutonic energy is very authentic within itself. Okay, so you can't sway someone by talking to them or talking them into a relationship or a friendship. this or a belief system, okay, it's very, very difficult to manipulate that Scorpio Pluto energy. Very difficult, yeah? And it's also much like a kind of an equal part, I would say, like a Sagittarian with a lot of Pluto placements. It's very difficult to bring them back once they've lost interest. Same with the Scorpio. All right, so I hope that made sense. So this deals in money. Pluto does deal in power play. So it deals in ownership. And I've been in like entangled with a Scorpio person before, to the point where what they'll do, they'll entrap you. So Scorpios deal in traps. I did talk about this in my dark-sided series, talking about Scorpios, is that they will keep you safe from everything but them. You know, let me get that for you. Let me get that house for you. Let me put you in that house. Let me take care of you. But in doing so, they are weakening the person and trapping the person so the person can't leave. You know, we've all had Scorpio friends that get very jealous, that don't like you having other friends. They get very defensive. So what it is the darker aspect of a Pluto placement is someone that can be very possessive. You know, Hades took Persephone down to the underworld against her will and offered her this whole other world, but she can't leave. It's like the Hotel California kind of stuff, okay? And that's really awesome if you're a Pisces and you want to be like the porn star that's getting filmed, but Pluto energy is the one filming you and making money and selling the DVDs and selling it on fans only. Much like Capricorn, this is about power play. All right, so I want you to understand it and understand it good, because I'm telling you the real shit. If you have people with this placement that's really heavy, then send their chart into me, because I'll be giving it to you straight once I look at what's going on with this. I'll put your chart and their chart right side by side and go, yep, no, run, This is serial killer stuff, okay? But yes, Pluto is where you dedicate power for good or evil. And this energy is about the use or the misuse of power. All right. So we also see a lot of people with high Pluto aspects in their chart, like Michael Jackson. You know, they're very, very, very high, and then they go crashing back down. Another one I remember I was looking at ages ago was, I think it was Charlie Sheen. I think at one point he was super, super wealthy, like, you know, $5 million an episode or something, ridiculous amount of money that he was getting. And then all of a sudden the sex scandals come out, and then they get exposed, just like Michael Jackson did, and their credibility is just ripped away in seconds. That no one wants to hire them, they're lost, they're a disgrace. Yeah, a lot of golden boy stuff, people that are, you know, exposed for cheating, you know. So this is the thing, Pluto deals in ethics and moral codes, but it is the aspect that will be exposed to the world. So people that have been lying, people that have been deceitful, people that have built a false reality around their sexuality or around being anti-drugs, like Lance Armstrong, high Pluto placements. You know, and of course, he was writing a book and making millions of dollars, and then it all came out the whole time he was just lying. So this is where transformation looks like. This is where transformation sits within your chart, and it is a forced transformation. You know, I had some massive shifts in my chart just last year in my Pluto, and I was ripped back to the coals, raked across everything, dark night of the soul, you know, laying on the floor, living in a very, very poor area that I ended up moving to. It was cursed by Aboriginal people in this area of Perth where I was living, and having such karmic retribution that I had to face. You know, it nearly killed me. It's like stripping someone naked, getting them down on their knees, blindfolding them, hitting them over the head about 20 times with a heavy bat, spitting on them, punching them, and then ripping all of their finances, all of their resources away, and then them having to figure out who they are. You know, it's like when we have very I know that sounds extreme, but that's what we're dealing with when we look at Pluto. All right. So it's where you surrender, and it's where you go inside yourself to rebuild yourself. So reincarnation lives in Pluto. All right. So Pluto also deals in traumas and fears, fears of being inadequate, fears of your future self, fears of you not being capable. This is a sign of energy in that Scorpio, which is breaking down and peeling back the facade of who you are, that you are uglier than you thought you were, that you're not as pretty as you thought you were, that you're not as smart as you thought you were. This is, following a religious system that is all false. And, your pastor that you follow is a pedophile. All of this type of stuff is all in that Pluto energy. All right. So always look to see where people's Mars is placed when it's in conjunct with Pluto, because that's the propeller that will propel them forward. And if it's sitting within that planet, it's like it's a vehicle for power, and it exposes things. All right. So I hope all of this is making sense. So it's also very hard because Pluto is also about self-sabotage as well. Depending on where it's placed. If you had like your Neptune, I'd have to look at your chart, but I mean, it's a harsh thing. There is an aspect of someone being quite sadistic. It's an aspect of someone being quite paranoid or even cruel. Or even someone who might use Pluto energy and wield truth as a way to hurt people. So, yeah, it's a lot of sexuality, and your inner child that is suppressed lives in Pluto. So it's like taboo thought processes, addictions, all of that, like dark sexuality, sexual fantasies happen within Pluto. I think that the masculine aspect of Pluto is the story of, it is obviously the story of Persephone, which Hades was watching Persephone. And the story is that, well, I mean, when we look at the story of Persephone, let's just look at Hades for a second, because I mean, he's Lord of the underworld. So it's like he is the person that dispenses justice of where the souls end up within the underworld, whether it's Tartarus, which is like, what became like hell, I guess, or whether it's the Elysian fields, where people live in this harmonic day that is on a loop. And a lot of the people there are in this paradise, but they don't know how long they've been there for. So there was this, deciphering of the human experience in the underworld. And that's what Pluto deals in. And so Pluto himself was lonely. It's Hades was lonely, and he was like gazing from underneath the world into the top world. And through his gaze, he spotted this beautiful goddess maiden of the springtime, which was Persephone. And Persephone is, she brings sunlight to everything, and her job is to name flowers, which is just such the opposite of, this gloomy, dark warrior energy that's in Pluto. And Pluto falls in love with her. And it's quite this opposition thing that you'll see. You will see this actually, I will say, I've seen this a lot with relationships where the man is like 6'6", built like a brick shit house, covered in tattoos, big thick beard, very thick neck, huge biceps, very Hades energy. And then you see their partner who will be like this tiny little Asian girl. It's very much, Pluto is masculine energy in itself, in its projection. And it's just, it's wanting to make someone feel safe or embody them. It's like you can only imagine what it would be like when they fuck. Do you know what I'm like? That's what I'm saying. Like Pluto, like the underworld energy turns a lot of people on because it's so heavy and dark. But yeah, so the story is that he spots her in a field, and And, she doesn't know that he's watching her. And it is a little bit rapey, a lot of Greek mythology stories are. And of course, he wants to make Persephone his own. He wants to own and possess her. So he creates a flower in the field that starts to bloom, and it's like very beautiful, and she's never seen it before, and she's a young kind of maiden, and she goes over to it, and the floor vibrates, and the earth cracks open, and out of this chasm of energy comes Hades. And he basically grabs her and takes her down into the underworld to be his bride, whether she likes it or not, and bring her into a place where she can't leave and she feels trapped, and she fucking hates it down there. She won't sleep, she won't eat, and she won't make love with him because she doesn't want him. And so he creates this kind of world where he makes these flowers for her and these succulent coral things that he does, and she's like, nah, not interested. So it's like an unequated love that she begins to, over time, she sees him and she starts to fall. It's not a love that she falls into straight away. And then, of course, Demeter is Persephone's mother, and she's furious. She can't find her daughter anywhere. And all the other gods kind of know about, what's going on, what Hades did. And so she goes to Zeus and says, what's with all of this? And he kind of is like, look, Hades took Persephone, and she's like, well, if you don't give her back to me, then I'm going to fuck up the earth and stop everything from growing. So yeah, you won't have any people worshipping you because I'm going to kill them because they won't be able to eat any food because I control nature. And so Zeus is like, oh, look, all right, we'll make a deal. Let's work something out. So yeah, and then of course the other side, down in the underworld, Persephone, the story about the pomegranate, she eats seeds from a pomegranate, which kind of binds her to the underworld. If you eat the fruit of hell or the fruit of the underworld, then you are kind of stuck there. So there's kind of like this depression and feeling completely trapped. And, Hades wants Persephone to be his bride on the throne, and so what ends up happening is there is like a deal that is made where, of course, Demeter gets her daughter back, for seasons. And then when it goes into winter, Pluto gets Hades gets his bride. And so there's kind of like a negotiation around this. So if you've ever been around a Scorpio person that is really into you, they will, where people, you will see people kind of like, if you love me, if you can be this for me, then I'll give you this, so there's like a bit of deal going on, a lot of deals take place, a lot of navigation of like contracts happen within the underworld, deals in the underworld. The demonic world is the underworld, the lower astral. Deals happen. But, it's all when you when you have to pay the piper and no one wants to pay back, everyone wants to get something, but, it's about what you're giving back as well. So this all rules the story, and so, yeah, if you know the story about Demeter and Persephone and the pomegranate, then you'll know that that's how it kind of went down. So it's a great story and I really love it. But yeah, that's what it is. But yes, back to Pluto. So yeah, Pluto is transformation, and it's where you have to go to die to yourself so that you can be reborn again, so that you can live again. It's a very, very powerful planet. And, where it sits in relation to everything is really important. What house does it sit in? Does it sit in the second house with like money and transformation? Is your Pluto, is it sitting in the third house? Is you've got a Scorpio maybe in the third house where it's like trying to, intellectualize things? Is it in the seventh house, which deals in power struggles? A lot of relationships with Scorpion energy is, like I said, it's all power play. So I think that the question that happens a lot with Pluto is, what am I worth? There's a lot of self-worth stuff that goes on, because when we're in this human world, we're all selling something of ourselves to get something. We're trying to convince people of who we are in the workplace to hire us, or for our boss not to fire us, or for that girl to date us, because we know that we're in a marketplace. They don't have to date me. There's other people that they can date as well. So it deals in self-worth. And that's what a lot of the darker aspect of the Pluto is, people that can confuse monetary gain for emotionality. And I've seen that with a lot of Scorpion people, where they're like, well, I might not have the biggest dick, or I might not be the most attractive, but I've got that third property, and I've got this house, and I've got this car. And so a lot of that can happen in the shadow aspect of Pluto, where they acquire things in the physical world to try and overcompensate or to sweeten the deal of their attraction, to make people want them more. So it's a lot of that going on. Scorpio and Pluto energy is also quite like conniving. It can be quite cunning. You'll see a lot of people that work for HR that will either be a Cancer or a Scorpio. They're people that will position themselves in places where there is authority that they work for, but they kind of have this falsehood where they're presenting themselves to the staff as being on the staff side. But the truth of it is, when you go to HR, they're being paid by the company. So their job isn't to look after you, it's to look after the company and protect the company from lawsuits. This is all Pluto energy. A lot of Pluto is also protection. It's not like, so it's like, it'll listen to what you have to say, but its ultimate goal may not be in alignment with what it tells you that it is. Okay, so I have noticed that a lot with a lot of these Plutonian people. They go for law, they go for money, they go for things that put them and elevate them in a higher position than a regular employee, so that they can feel in control, if that makes sense. And that can be, there's a darker aspect to that as well, because obviously what is good for the goose is good for the gander, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's a lot. But I mean, when I think of Pluto, I think of the underworld, and I think of Hades. I think of also punishment. It was kind of, Pluto or Hades was like a god that was begrudgingly given that role. He didn't want to live down there in the underworld. That was kind of, he got the short straw kind of thing. So there's a bit of like resentment towards others that can happen here if it's not checked, if it's not spoken about, if it's not brought to the surface. So yeah. Well, I hope I've covered everything here. Always remember that when we look at a chart, look at the aspects that happen within Pluto and where they affect, like the trines, the sextiles, the conjunctions, the squares, the oppositions. All of this stuff has to be looked at thoroughly. So if you want me to look at your chart and you're booking me for a reading and you say, I want to look at the subconscious aspects to my chart, then I'm going to be looking more at your Pluto aspects. All right. So yeah, just putting it out there. But if you don't, if you just want a general reading, then it will just be me just, this is where your Venus is. This is where the house plays out. This is what this means. I can do that. But yeah. Anyway, go ahead and place a booking with me. If you'd like to, please go ahead and do so. And I will get your reading conducted as soon as I can. I really love doing this stuff. I really love doing this. I really enjoy it. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for listening to this video on Pluto. I think we're going to continue this series. Going to look at the nodes next, or maybe we'll look at some other planets and keep this going. Not sure. There's a few different reasons. A few different things I want to do. But yes, coming into next month, apologies for my delay with my Patreon. I will be setting up a Patreon in the next couple of weeks, and then I will be sharing some more stuff that I can't really share here on this channel. So stay tuned. Okay. All right, lots and lots of love, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bye, bye, bye.